Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Old Salt, and it's from Never Bored Games. Never Bored Games. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page to find out more information than I could possibly tell you here. To do that, all you got to do is follow the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Go there, find out more information, and hopefully consider backing the project. Now, Old Salt is a competitive strategy and territory control game. You and the other players take control of these different factions who control a fleet of warships and also islands in this fantasy world covered by quite a lot of water. Every faction has its own different special abilities. Barbarians are very savage and are very good at taking small units but also doing heavy damage with them. There's factions that can actually resurrect their ships as sort of like ghost ships of a sort. There's factions that are really good at attacking from afar and leaving debris, so on and so forth. Your goal is to not just make the best use of your faction's abilities, but in doing so, take control of as many islands as possible, not only to stymie your other players, but also to get yourself to victory. Now, of course, that is a lot easier said than done, and there's quite a bit more going on in the game as well. So what we're going to do is take a brief look at how the game is played with a prototype copy of the game. So just do bear in mind that what you see here in this video may change in the final version, and that is, of course, why you need to go to the Kickstarter page to find out more information about the future of the game. But then in any event, we will come back and discuss it further. Old Salt is a competitive ship-faring conquest and territory control game for 2 to 4 players. You will take control of one of several different factions with starting control of 3 islands and a small fleet of ships dispersed between them. Using just these ships, a limited amount of coins, the unique abilities of your faction, and the ability to exploit the trade winds of the sea, you need to fight enemy ships and seize their islands for your own. The game ends either when one player seizes 6 islands, when only one player still has ships at sea, or if the trade winds tokens are depleted. Whoever comes out on top in one of these scenarios is the winner of the game and declared the Old Salt. To begin the setup, lay out the game board representing the sea, split up into hexes, the islands the players are vying for, and the 3 different colored trade winds areas. There are 9 tokens, 3 for each trade winds area, and you'll randomly remove 1 from the game at the start, then randomize the rest and leave them in a stack near the board. More on this later. Every player chooses a faction, or randomly has one assigned to them. Every faction has their own set of components to denote their ships and islands, but there is also a faction card that tells you their 3 unique abilities, some of which are passive and some which require coins to activate. For example, the barbarians can terrify ships and make them flee, or use vicious grappling hooks to reel in their foes. Engineers can salvage destroyed enemy ships near them for extra coins, or fortify their islands with tokens to deal damage to invaders. Eternals can transcend their ships into a type of ghost ship, which can then be used as gateways for their physical ships to teleport through. And the Forgotten are experts at attacking from range and fleeing, as well as using debris tokens to slow down the enemy. Faction abilities are optional for the game, and the players should all decide ahead of time if they'd like to use them or not. When everyone has their faction components, you'll next choose your 3 starting islands. These can be assigned at random, or you can draft the islands in a selected player order. But either way, each player will end up with 3 islands on the board that have a banner piece matching their faction's color and symbol. If you're playing with only 2 or 3 players, the players will take turns using ocean tokens to close off the islands that will not be used due to the lack of players. The players will now need to construct their fleet, with everyone using a preset amount of coins determined by everyone at the start, with the recommended budget being 17 per player. There are actual coin tokens each player should take to keep track of this. Most ships have 5 hit points, a firing range of 5 hexes, and can fire an amount of times equal to their remaining health, though you must pay a coin to fire each time. There are 5 types of ships in the game, each with their own special abilities, or lack thereof, and the stock for each ship is limited. All ships cost 3 coins except for the orange grunt ships, which cost only 2 but have no abilities. Blue Leviathans have a health of 8, red Zealots can fire for free once each round, green Hazards will explode when destroyed and cause damage to ships around it, and can also be manually detonated, and lastly, yellow Marksmen have a max firing range of 9, but also a minimum range of 5. Players will take turns purchasing their fleet, with any leftover coins carrying over to the first round of play. Then they'll either randomly place or take turns placing their newly purchased ships next to their 3 islands, with a mass token denoting their faction placed into each one. The actual direction of the ship matters as well when placed. When all of this is set up, roll the provided die to determine who will go first, or use the turn order you've been using for setup. Turns go in clockwise order from there, and in the first round, in addition to whatever leftover coins you have from ship purchasing, you also get bonus coins depending on your turn number, either 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending on if you're the first, second, third, or fourth player, respectively. On future rounds, each player gets money equal to the number of islands they control, but always a minimum of 3 coins. Also, we should talk about the trade wins now. These are ignored on the first round, but on the second round and every round after that, the very first thing you do in a round is take the top token off the randomized stack of trade wins tokens and place it by its trade wins area on the board. This becomes a known trade wins area, and all ships have 2 extra hexes of movement in that area. If a trade wins token is drawn that matches one already on the board, both tokens are removed from the game and that trade wins is lost until it is drawn again, if ever. On your turn, there are 3 general actions you can take, but plus any faction abilities that you can afford to use and that may apply. First, you can sail up to 3 of your ships, but other ships can still take other actions even if you don't sail them. Each ship can only be moved once up to 3 adjacent hexes, or 5 if they sail through an active trade winds area. Remember that the direction your ship faces matters as well and must be taken into consideration as you move. Whether they move or not, you can choose to have any of your ships fire at any enemy ship that is within their range. It costs 1 coin for each attack, and they can only fire a number of times equal to their health at the start of the turn. When you attack, roll the die. The minimum number you need to roll to hit the enemy ship is the number of tiles distant it is from your ship. For example, you must roll a 4 or a 5 to hit a ship 4 tiles away. The die also has a miss face that can cause the attack to be unsuccessful regardless. Positioning matters when attacking a ship. If you attack the stern or the bow, the directions indicated by the black areas on the ship token, the difficulty for the attack increases by 1. But if you attack the broadsides, there is no difficulty penalty, and you can fire 3 times simultaneously for the cost of 2 coins, assuming that ship can even attack that many times. But in this case, the defending enemy can return fire 1 time for free if they survive the first shot of the barrage. If you destroy an enemy ship, you get to claim their mast as a reward. At the start of your next turn, you have the option of turning in masts for extra coins. You can turn in up to 3 at once for 1, 3, and 5 coins, respectively. But holding on to masts is very important for the third type of action, which is seize. If you have a ship adjacent to an enemy island, you can pay 2 coins and 1 mast that matches the banner of the enemy island, then replace that banner with your own. Even if the island is uncontrolled, you must still spend an enemy banner of your choice from among those you've collected. At any point that is applicable, players can make use of their faction abilities, some of which are passive and always on, and some of which must be activated with coins. Rounds will continue like this, with players taking turns moving ships, firing on enemy ships, and attempting to seize islands. The first player to seize 6 islands automatically wins the game. A player can also outright win if they are the last player with any ships remaining. But otherwise, the game ends at the end of the round after the last trade wins token is drawn and placed. Then, whoever has the most islands wins the game, with ties being broken by number of ships, then number of coins, and then whoever swam in a body of water last. Whoever comes out on top in any scenario is the winner, and is declared the Old Salt. Well, Old Salt is a very interesting game because when you first glance at it, you see a bunch of different tokens and, this big, wide, expansive board with all these different things going on. And you think, whoa, this must be like an incredibly complicated game. Now, there is quite a bit of strategy in the game, and there are quite a few rules. But what was kind of interesting to me, among other things, was that it is very straightforward and what you have to do and what you have to accomplish in the game, the goals that you have to attain, while at the same time having enough meat there to chew on that to make it into a heavier strategy game without being too overwhelming. And a lot of that has to do with the theme as well. I think that if this was the type of game where it was just like a field with a bunch of different structures and units, it would be a whole other ball game. But the fact that you are doing this ocean warfare, right, in this fantasy world, and with just the different islands, and it puts the primary focus on unit movement, right? So there's not a ton of units that each faction has, especially if you play with less than the maximum amount of players. And another interesting aspect of the game is what you start the game with as far as units. While that might vary, because you have the control of how many units you purchase and the expense of which units you purchase. Of course, you can just buy a bunch of cheap units, but whatever that is, that's what you have for the game, right? So you have to make the most use of that. So it puts a very, very heavy emphasis on those units that you have and making the most use of them as efficiently as possible. That's the other thing too. Everything is fueled with coins. You have a limited amount of coins and a limited amount of actions that you can take also, because also your ship's health determines, each individual ship's health determines how many actions they can actually take, how many shots they can actually take. So you have all these different things you need to worry about, and it's that heavy, heavy emphasis on units. Units are not expendable the way they are in some other territory control strategy games. And for that, it doesn't really feel like one of these other territory control strategy games. And the faction abilities also play a huge hand in that every different faction is so different than the others and has such a different focus. Every one of them has special abilities that are perfectly viable for a different situation. And it will encourage you and it will make you want to try a different faction every single time. The resurrecting ships or putting out the debris, the barbarians just being very straightforward, but very powerful as well, but also one of those burn out and fade away type races if you're not too careful, or factions. So just this big wide variety. The engineers were also super interesting. I could go on and on, but each one of them having these distinct abilities that make them so interesting just adds a lot of not only a layer of replayability to the game, but also it just, again, that focus on units, encouraging you to do different things with your factions. There's also the element, too, when you kind of look at the board, it can seem like, it's kind of wide open, right? There's not a ton of other things going on besides the factions and their islands, but those trade winds, too. That's a whole other interesting mechanic to the game, where you are, again, it's all about efficiency. You have such a limited amount that you can both move your ships and act with them that everything feels decisive. So you want to take advantage of those trade wins as best as possible every single round in order to get that little boost and get into your opponent as quickly as possible. And if you plan ahead, but your opponent does not, and make use of those to really swoop in on their island, potentially while they thought they were safe moving away units from their island to go take care of someone else's island or conquer one of the unclaimed islands, you can swoop in and try to take it from them. And actually, if you can get through their units, again, this is why the emphasis is on the units, it's not terribly difficult to take an island that's not that well defended. But there is another element of interesting stuff there because you take islands with the conquered banners that you have. But you can also sell those for the very limited resource of coins that you need to fuel your actions, including faction abilities. So there's this efficiency and give and take to what you do. It's a relatively simple game for this type of game to set up, to learn, to teach to other people, and to get going. And turns go by very quickly, but within that sort of efficient time space, there's a lot of decisions you have to make, and everything feels critical and important in what you're trying to accomplish there. So, and again, because of that and because of the variety of the factions, no two games are going to feel exactly the same. So if you like that type of thing, if you like that type of crunchy game, but you also don't want a game that takes like an hour just to set up and just to learn, and something that, sure, it's probably going to mostly appeal to players who want a heavier strategy game, but that you could, realistically teach to someone who's sort of new to these, because it's not that overwhelming. If any of that sounds like it appeals to you, then hey, listen, you don't have to take my word for it. You can go to the official Kickstarter project page and find out more information for yourself. To do that, all you gotta do is follow the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Go there, find out more information, and hopefully consider backing the project. That is Old Salt from Never Bored Games. I didn't even mention, and I'm sorry to do this, maybe I did that during the preview section. Old Salt, it refers to the title given to like the legendary storyteller whose accomplishments were so wide and varied and successful out on the ocean, they earned the title Old Salt, if you were wondering what the name is. But that is Old Salt from Never Board Games. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, for supporting our sponsors. Take care.